This video is going to show you how to take a payment against the invoice that we created in the last video. From the home page, clicking on Invoices opens up to the Overview page. On the Overview page, we can see this is the invoice we made last for 50 Rand for Stuart Durnham. While we're on this page, I want to show you that this is also where you access your month end. There's a menu that shows you various settings that we'll change in advanced features in a further video. The ability to make day sheets that you might want to make for a previous day, and how to navigate to the payment page, which we are going to do shortly. You can also find a particular found sets, for instance, all the invoices for Stuart Durnham, and then you can hit the total button, and that will tell you how much has been invoiced and paid for that found set. Let me just do that quickly. So we're going to find by, let's say, by folder number, because folder number 5 was Mr. Durnham. Sorry, I didn't type anything in there. Folder number. And folder number 5 was Mr. Durnham. I'll hit the find button again. And it finds all these invoices for Mr. Stuart Durnham. If I click on the total button now, you can see that the total invoiced was that, the total that's been paid is that, the total due is that, and there's a nice aging analysis of this particular patient. I'm going to go back to the overview. And the one we're interested in is the last one, which I can get to quickly by pushing the end button on my keyboard. And you remember we made these two invoices with those codes 0000. Let's select that one. And now I want to pay something off on that invoice. By the way, each invoice has a unique number which is incremented serially as you make new invoices with the new record button. I'm going to go to the payment page. Again, this page initially looks a little busy, but it actually is very simple. To orientate yourself, you already know and expect those buttons and these buttons. This is just the patient's name, the rate that you charge him by default, and his medical aid. This is how much is due on that particular invoice currently. This is a block for entering payments, and this block here just echoes the lines that you made on the invoice layouts, just to save you having to toggle backwards and forwards between layouts to see exactly what line items had been made on that invoice. This is a note field for you to write a payment plan. For instance, we'll pay at the end of the month, or we'll pay off in installments, or whatever you want to write when you speak to this patient. Alright, so now we're going to click in the amount paid. Let's say this patient's going to pay 5 Rand. Click in here. By default, it'll enter today's date in the date paid. But you can change that to whenever you actually received cash payments, or the date on the check. This becomes important for reconciliation with your bank statements. The computer also automatically records the date it was made on the computer, so this date should be the date that was either on your bank statement for a direct deposit, or the date you received the cash, or the date on the check. And let's go and put in here the amount paid, and let's just put in 5 Rand to make it easy. I'm going to click in the paid by, and I'm going to get rid of the pop-up list by clicking the escape key. And let's see, who was it paid by? Well, let's say it was paid by Mr. Durnham. How paid? Let's say it was a check what was the check number. And this field, if you use a hard copy receipt book, put in the receipt number here. In general, a hard copy receipt book is not required when using Bluebird, and we'll deal with that further in the advanced payment paid features. And then you need to post that payment against this invoice. You'll see the invoice had 50 Rand owing. If I hit post, it'll now have 45 Rand owing. Alright, so let's do that again, and I'll show you an additional feature that makes data entry a little easier. So let's put another amount paid here, but let's say 4 Rand. Paid today, and you can see here, paid by the patient or paid by the medical aid. If I click on patient, it'll automatically put Mr. Durham in here because that is the patient. And let's say this is paid by cash. There won't be a check number, and I'll post it. And you can see now 9 Rand's been paid and there's 41 Rand owing. Similarly, let's say 1 Rand was paid by the medical aid, which in this case was Genesis. They would have normally paid electronically. That stands for Automatic Clearing Bureau. If there is a number on your statement or on their remittance advice, put it in here to help you identify it later, and post it. Now there's 40 Rand owing. Well, let's say that I want to now give this patient a discount. Remember, we offered them a discount if they paid within 30 days. We offered them a 40% discount, and the discounted total would be 30 Rand. So let's say now that they have paid within that time. So they give you 30 Rand. Let's put that in. 30 Rand, paid by the patients, paid by a check. Okay, now you can see there's 10 Rand that's left to be paid, but in fact we only asked them to pay off 30 Rand. So we want to give them a 10 Rand discount. Putting in 10 Rand, hitting the discount button, and that puts that amount through as a discount, which is a journal entry. You haven't really received money. All of these payments are actually made in a separate file called the money file, which you can get at the home page, and a subsequent video will deal with. But there's a shortcut to the money file over here, so I'm going to click on that just to show you how these entries all appear in that separate money file. And you can see here that there are 5 separate entries, 3 of them paid by Mr. Durham, 1 paid by Genesis, the deposit category. A discount would have been a journal entry, and the category is discounts, and it's minus 10 Rand because that was minus money that they paid. The reason we do that is depending on if you pay VAT on an invoice or a receipt basis, you might have to get your VAT back for journal entries. For example, if you pay VAT on an invoice basis and you generate an invoice for 50 Rand, and then you give them, then you've already paid VAT on 50 Rand. If you give them a discount or a credit note of 10 Rand, you want to get that VAT back. And in that case, this would have come through as VAT yes, so you can get the VAT back, whereas these ones would have all come through as VAT no, because you were paying VAT on the invoice, not on the payments that came in. Okay, important concept, I just want to recap. You either pay VAT on a receipt basis or an invoice basis. If you pay it on a receipt basis, money that comes into the practice will be marked VAT as yes, because you're paying VAT on what you've received. In that case, journal entries are always marked as no, because they don't reflect your VAT one way or another. If, however, you're paying VAT on an invoice basis, you would have already paid VAT on the whole total of the invoice, so when payments came in, they wouldn't affect your VATs. However, when journal entries came in, you need to get that VAT back from the receiver, so in that case, this field would say yes. You can see by the label on the top left here that I am in the money file and I'm on the deposit layouts. The same shortcut here will take me back to the payment page on the invoices. Here I am. Now it's also important to only take as much money as you invoiced for, or at least to only record payments on this page for invoices that you made. For example, this invoice is now completely paid off. If I get another payment for this invoice, for instance, the patient's paid and the medical aid is paid, the correct thing is not to go and make another entry on this invoice which is already paid off. We'll do it just to show you what I mean. I'm going to go here and I'm going to put in 5 Rand paid by the medical aid, and it was an ACB and it was 345, and I'm going to post it. Now immediately it says you're about to pay off more than you invoiced. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Trying to tell you that it's not the usual. Your other option, and in my mind the better option, is to use the unallocated credits in the money file. And I'll show you in a while how that works. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to post that. And what you're going to see now is that the invoice due is minus 5 Rand. In other words, you owe the patient 5 Rand. I'm going to now use our standard buttons here to move to another invoice for Mr. Stuart Durham. And I remember the last one we created was actually for 20 Rand. And you can see it here. It was also our test item, but done at a different rate. If you want to write off an invoice, you can select the amount you want to write off, let's say 20 Rand, and you can pass a credit note for that 20 Rand. Okay, and you can see that's posted and the amount owing now is 0. But whenever you do a credit note, I would highly recommend one goes through to the money file, and in this block here you have an opportunity to type an explanation as to why one passed a credit note. It's really important because credit notes are one way that staff could take cash money in from a patient and then write down the invoice and put the money in their own pockets. We all believe that our staff would never be capable of such a thing, but if one sticks to the Bluebird guidelines, nobody ever has to doubt that things were done legitimately, and it protects both the staff and the physician. So here one would type in this credit was applied because etc, etc, etc. What happens here is on the day sheet that's printed, not only will the credit note come up, but also the explanation as to why the credit note was generated. And it's important for either the practice manager or preferably the physician to look at these day sheets every day. I'm going to go back to the payment page in the invoices file by clicking on this button. I'm now going to go to the overview page to try and see if there are any other invoices that we could enter a payment against. Let's go to this one, invoice here, and click on the payment page. Alright, and this one has 100 Rand owing, and there are no entries so far. So I'm going to go and put on 100 Rand here, paid on the 7th by Mr. Stuart Durham, and he paid cash and it's posted. Now once again I get the medical aid pays another 100 Rand for this same invoice. The better way of entering that payment is as follows. Open up the money file from the home page, clicking on the money file. Make a new entry. Be sure that you're on the deposit tab. A new deposit. The date when one received it. If you use the control key and the minus sign in Bluebird, it will automatically put in today's date for you. If it was a check, the check number, let's say this was a check that came from the medical aid, and it was check number that. The payee was the medical aid, I think it was Genesis. The deposit category was a check, it was a deposit, and under category 2, instead of fee income, which most of our deposits are, say unallocated fee income. It's not allocated against an invoice because that invoice has already been paid off by the patient on the day they were there. And you'll see that once you select unallocated fee income, automatically unallocated is filled in over here, and it tells you to remember to select a folder number, which you do here. Which patient was it for? And I'm going to type DUR for Durham, and that will put the number 5 in there. Okay, so we know that this patient now has an amount of, we've got to put the amount in here, of 100 Rand extra that was received that we hadn't invoiced for. I'm going to go back to the invoices file now through the home page. Click on invoices. And it doesn't matter which invoice for Mr. Durham we're on. If you go to the payment page, you'll see now there's a credit running of 100 Rand. I'm going to go back to the overview, and let's say we want to allocate that credit now against an invoice. Well, we could allocate it against any invoice, but just because there's one here for 100 Rand, I'm going to go to the payment page, and I'm going to put this patient's credit against this invoice. And this is just a reminder for you that this patient has a credit. And I'm going to put 100 Rand in here. Remember, the invoice was for 100 Rand and there's 100 Rand credits. And we put here, we choose from credits. This uses the unallocated payments in the money file to make payments against this invoice. Continue. And you can see here, hit the post, invoice dues 0. This won't be refreshed until one goes to overview and comes back to any payment page. You'll see here now the credit is 0. If one takes that shortcut through to the money file, you'll see that there is a payment now, or rather a deposit. That's a minus deposit that's been made, also tagged with the patient's folder number and also with unallocated. And what that does is the 100 that was in here earlier on as a deposit, and this 100 now for this new payment cancel each other out, and that's why there are no more credits for this patient. To show you what I mean, I'm going to do a find by 5 and unallocated. Unallocated. That's the first unallocated fee income we made it as a deposit. This is the second journal entry we made when we chose from credits. The two cancel each other out. The computer knows that these must cancel each other out because they both have this unallocated tag. Okay, and that's the best way to run when you have money that comes in more than you invoiced for. I'm going to go to the patient data file of that same patient, Mr. Durham. Okay, and I've already done a find for Mr. Durham. We found 1 of 1. I just wanted to do that quickly and not chow up video space. Now I'm going to go to this patient's, and you can see all these invoices that we've been playing around with. I'm scrolling across here. The interesting thing here is you'll see in red -5. This means that we have taken more money against that invoice than we ever invoiced. And the reason it's red is to draw your attention to it, because you shouldn't be taking more money than you invoiced to. I'm going to use the shortcut to go to that invoice, and you can see that this is the invoice where we took that extra R5 from Genesis more than we were supposed to. Also on this page you can see the total number of payments that have been made. There's 6 for this invoice, and the total rand item of those payments. You can see the date the invoice was created and the time it was created, when it was last modified. And I think the other features on here we'll save for the advanced payment page. That's really all you need to know to take payments and get up and running and using Bluebird for billing.